Hello, viewers, and welcome to this edition of Global Vibes. My guest today is multifaceted, very talented, and with views that matter to us today. Please join me in welcoming Heather McLeod. Heather, thank you so much for being our guest and for taking the time to talk to us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Roopa.
Thank you, Heather. So, Heather, you are a singer, a songwriter, a broadcaster, a podcast presenter, a financial planner, and a climate change activist. Have I missed anything, Heather? But we'll talk about all of those. And this must have been a very interesting and a beautiful personal journey, right? What are those worldviews that has inspired or informed you of all these interests that you have been nurturing through the years?
I think I'm a storyteller and raised in a family of storytellers with a community commitment. And when I was very young, I heard the power of telling a story well beyond my family. I had a few impactful moments. For instance, when we lived in Calgary and I was 7 or 8, my sisters and I went to a festival for children, and they had all these ways to be creative and a big top in which they presented with total seriousness jokes and plays and songs written by children that they credited. And we as children went, oh, I want to get in that big top, right?
Oh,
so we went home and we spent a whole week madly like writing poems and jokes and little plays and songs. And we were into roller skating. So I remember we would roller skate in circles and just tell each other what we were thinking and madly put them in our scribblers and went back before they were done. First of all, the performance was a whole other set. Like they had such a library of stories by children they wanted to share. They didn't repeat themselves. We love that. And then they had a call out, if you came with something to share, come meet us afterwards behind. And when we went back, I sang one of my songs, and this woman wrote it down as I sang. And I had never thought that you could write music on a stave, with a little keyboard, the way that you write words. And I decided I want to write that kind of story too. It was magical to me. So I started pursuing music. It became a passion. And then we got a telegram about, within a year or two. This was in the 70s, like a telegram. It was so weird. The knock at the door, and there's a telegram from me, the little kid. And that troupe was Nickelodeon before they'd had a TV show, and they had their first little cable show coming out.
Wow.
And they wanted to use my song for their opening sequence,
Oh, my.
which they did.
Oh, wow.
So it was a contract telegram to me. It was very interesting. So that's talk about getting reinforced, right? That the stories we have to tell, little as we may be, naive and new at this as we may be, they resonate. They're powerful. And I'm also a real nerd. We grew up listening to CBC, always on in our house. My family has really meaty conversations. They don't just chit-chat. And so I've known the joy of learning new things my whole life. And the two go wonderfully together. If you think people are interesting and you love to learn, life is an adventure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What is the essence of your writings, whether it's story or whether it's a poem or a song? What is the theme? What is the central theme that drives you or inspires you or interests you?
Well, there's a lot of songs out there. I've written hundreds over the years.
I see you have a lot of
and I have
CDs
many albums.
and
Yeah, so
albums
yeah, that's what I
well.
did for a living. I started writing songs young, just a couple of years when I was a teenager, and then I studied that in university and paid my way through with a jazz ensemble. So my first recordings were jazz songs, and then I started releasing songs of my own music. And if I have to give them all a theme, I think it is really about how hard it is and how important it is to embrace our own value. That we're not just here and disposable, Everybody is precious. And it's easy to see that when you hold a baby in your arms, how much of a miracle and precious we are, or a kitten, or even see a shoot come up out of the ground.
Oh,
like you can
spring,
see how
yeah.
wonderful it is, but somehow in our own hearts it can be a real job to believe that of ourselves. And so that might be a reoccurring theme, to embrace all that makes us important.
So when you say embrace ourselves, value ourselves, you have You've been a Thunder Bay resident for long?
20 years.
20 years.
22 years now.
So you've also seen the community around us that has evolved, emerged, grown.
I came here with a great gig. I got to be a host on CBC Radio whose beat was profiling people in the community, you know, what they were doing. And we're full of incredible people that are very inspiring. I mean, honestly, the city is chock full of my heroes. They really are. A lot of them don't see how amazing they are. And so I have a lot of fun just holding up mirrors and also making connections and saying, you have to meet so-and-so. She's done this and you've done this, and they both brighten, like lighten up, and there's that magic of people making connections I also love, and it was part of that job. And a great way to get to know a new community. I had literally never been here before. I crisscrossed the country touring to promote my new albums, never got a gig in Thunder Bay. Liz Harvey Folds would put me up, and she'd do a house concert in Red Rock. So I knew people in Red Rock, but I'd never stopped in Thunder Bay until I got the job and moved here to be a community engagement journalist. So, yeah.
And have you seen a lot of changes over the years?
I think the walleye had a huge impact on this city in helping us see some of the wonderful things going on in a broader way than CBC and Rogers and other local places do. I feel the diversity of the city has been more embraced, and certainly international students becoming more commonly to the college and the university in the last few years has become more visible beyond the campuses, which is wonderful. Certainly in our food, in our businesses.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's a great addition. It's also always been a city of immigrants, but they were immigrants that looked, they're all from the same kind of part of Europe, you know? So this is more of the world in this city.
Yeah, generally, yes. All brown people are from Asia.
Or something,
you know, that's
right?
how you're clubbed. But yeah, so these have been your themes for your music, your albums, and your storytelling, stories as well, most of them.
Yeah, I'd say there's the personal journey within too, right? Like I started writing when I was very little, and I've had moments of that changed me, and I see that in the eras of my music for sure. So my third album, Bones, I felt like I'd graduated from just writing about my own angst. And I really imagined stories that were inspired by stories shared with me. For instance, one of them is called Waiting, and it's inspired by my great aunt, who in the Second World War, her husband went off to work to fight, and she got a job as a journalist in Philadelphia when there were really no men left to do those sorts of jobs. So she covered everything. And then when everybody came back, she lost some of those jobs. And one of her co-workers who'd actually been in the field before the war had a story of being married in a bad marriage out in the prairies and leaving it and having such difficulty, you know, in the 1930s without a man to try to build a life for yourself. And she'd managed to build her life as a journalist in the 1930s. And I imagined that woman, and I wrote a song imagining that day of deciding this place could not hold you anymore, and you had to step into an unknown future, which is a repeating theme for so many of us in so many ways. But it was rooted in that one shared true story.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see that on a regular basis on everyday life, how situations and people and environment, you know, make us as we are, and how we have to adapt and evolve as well. On that note, Heather, we will take a very short break. Dear viewers, stay tuned. There's so much more interesting themes and topics that we will chat with Heather. We will be right back. Welcome back, viewers. You're watching Global Vibes, and my guest today is Heather McLeod. Heather, you're a climate change activist, and we are seeing it's prevalent, it's happening, it's so visible. What are your insights on several of our friends who still believe that, you know, it's something for other generations to take care of while we enjoy what we have today?
I find that really interesting as a storyteller, right? Because stories that our brain loves have just a few characters. They have a nice clean arc, you know, a conflict, a resolution, a happy ending, or not. And climate change doesn't fit that. So it's hard for our brains to sort of follow the storyline and feel comfortable in it, and easier for us to shuffle it off. I also think, though, that climate change has some root causes that have big money behind them. And they have been working hard to play with our sense of what stories catch our attention, what our senses of the safe middle of the herd, middle of the road is to play within. We can't be passionate and deeply informed and willing to like stand our ground on everything there is to know out there. So I think that makes us vulnerable to, on the one side, feeling like less people care and understand the severity of this issue than do, and more people feel like it's not really a thing and we have to worry about them. You can amplify the minority if you hold the storytelling tools, and most of our stories are told on very few platforms that are up for sale. So that's my position. It's called, because I'm really excited actually. I recently read and got totally obsessed with The Point of Social Tipping. Apparently, to get something from feeling edgy and, you know, like it's hard, you have to kind of claim it, and this is my thing on the edge, to middle of the road, everybody's like, oh yeah, some people are like that. About 17% of the pattern we passively see around us should illustrate that that's something that people do. And that's why things like signs and windows can be so powerful, because it can give us that sense of, I can't hear what's in your brain, I don't know what your values are, but I see what your values you're willing to put in the front of your door are. And so I think, I think there's a lot of opportunity there to think about how we tell stories and what climate change means. And it just means that what we thought is going to change. And we know that. We're really good at adaptation, right? And therefore, we just need to make really thoughtful, collaborative efforts to do things more sustainably, because there's only one planet. It's only got one thin little skin of atmosphere on it. And the weather matters. It's not definitely matters. It really matters. So everybody, therefore, has a job that has a climate change aspect, right? Everybody, therefore, it's not what you buy, it's not who you vote for, it's bigger than that. It's, you know, what is your expertise? And how can you contribute to just shifting things so that we're more oriented for what we now know is the current average and is likely to change. And I think that changes a lot. There's a group called Drawdown. Like I got interested in climate change when I was in high school in the 80s. Oh my gosh, right? And then you think it's gone. You think it's kind of solved itself when you get busy with your family. And then you raise your head and you go, why is that still there?
It's more pronounced today.
How has that kept on getting worse, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy. So I feel like it could have been less of an issue to tackle if we'd gotten on it sooner. Now it's really pressing, for sure. And I'm drifting off a little bit on my point, but I do have a lot of thoughts on climate change. I thought it would be easier to solve, and now I feel like it's exciting to resolve.
It's exciting to resolve.
Oh, absolutely.
And collectively, individually, or as a group, because there's so much interconnectedness. I've read some of your articles.
Yeah.
Right? You have spoken about relationships and interconnectedness, inclusive community. How can an inclusive community support
that really caught my eye, right?
Yes.
So my son, about 3 or 4 years ago, he threw me for a loop because you know how kids are just so clear, right? So we were watching something on climate change. I'm like, I know all this. And he's like, what is being done? And I didn't have a good answer. So we went looking for good answers and found the Drawdown Project, which is great science, loved it. And they kind of grouped all the many, many solutions into 3 big themes. One is put less stuff into the atmosphere than, because we're putting in too much. The other is draw down more of what's in the excess carbon in the atmosphere. And I hadn't thought that, right? So that's about rewilding, restoring natural ecosystems. They capture carbon better than anything we've invented, and very quickly they can do so. So that was great. I can help do that. And the third most impactful one was build a more inclusive and fair society. I was like, how is that?
How is that?
It's because our superpower as human beings are our ability to collaborate together and get things done.
Okay.
And when we're in crisis, if you first make sure that everybody's okay, they've got a roof over their heads, they've got food, they've got the medical care they need, the education they need, and they're respected and cared for, you get through the worst storms. But we've been we're coming out of a couple hundred years of a kind of colonial world system. And the colonial world system has a place where you couldn't really sustain yourself anymore. You feel like you need more than you have. Okay. And that probably means you haven't managed the resources you have very well. So you have to go somewhere else to get enough to meet what you think are your needs. And you show up at that other place where they're doing just fine and try to convince them you're there because you're better than they are, right? And then you set up a system where somehow you're essential to all those essentials. If people are going to eat, if people are going to have shelter, if they're going to have an education, if they're going to have a place in the world, it's somehow tied to you as the colonialist, which means you have to impose insecurities. There's not this assumption that we're all equally important on those basics. There's this assumption that we could lose those basics if we somehow fail to stay high enough up on this strata of different levels of security and influence. It wastes a lot of resources, the most powerful of which is people. Like every single person I've ever met is so full of capacity. But when they're hurting and they don't have those basics met, all they can do is try to get by. Right. We've lost them as resources. So anytime they go and look at a society and they find ways to get women more powerful and equal in their society, get more people educated, to make sure there's no hunger, what the capacity of that society to solve its own problems is magical. It booms. So now we have a whole planet that really needs to boom in what we get done. And that's one of our most powerful tools, is looking at where we're excluding people, where we're disempowering them, and address those inequities. And we'll see things happen. I love that too, because it speaks to my heart. It just makes sense to me at such a deep level. So every time I find things that indicate it's true, I get happy. And they're there. There's lots of good science to prove it.
And it's a meaningful contribution as well.
Yeah.
As an individual or even as a group, as a community.
Absolutely.
And there is an active climate change group. And there is a conference coming up in October, if you'd like to just give a shout out, and if anybody's interested.
Yes, I got to be part of a group that have been organizing this. On Saturday, October 19th, we're just inviting everybody whose heart is hurting and who's already working but just wants to not feel so alone, have a safe space to have those conversations and see what comes of them. We're calling it the annual climate gathering because we had the first one last year.
Okay.
And we're trying to make it free to anybody. There's a cost, but it's pay what you can. So check out our website, Northwest Climate Gathering, and get the details.
Northwest Climate Gathering?
Yeah.
Okay, and this is happening at?
We're going to hold it this year at Lakehead University. We're renting the faculty lounge and we're spreading out on the property. It's going to be really fun.
And it's October 19th.
Saturday.
Right.
Yeah, all day.
It's going to be all day. And are you going to have community members from Thunder Bay in the region?
Whack of them. Okay. We have everything from like forest therapy to a climate cafe to a sacred fire to name that tree challenge, and a walk around the community gardens to talk about gardening as a climate action. There's going to be a meditative walk around the labyrinth, all sorts of ways to root us in this place and get our centers refreshed, but also good spaces to talk in. Fantastic. It's going to be so fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Heather, but we will stay tuned. We will be right back. We have a lot to talk about your podcast, so stay tuned, and dear viewers, we'll meet shortly. Hello viewers, and welcome back to Global Vibes. This is the last segment of our talk with Heather McLeod. And I'm sorry, I didn't get the surname right in the first place, but so nice of you to correct me, and thank you. Some of those names are unique to us, like some of our names are unique to you. So thank you for correcting on that. Heather, we will talk about your podcast. Sure. I know you have covered some of those very topical themes that is so relevant to our community.
But yeah, it's a series of mostly interviews with local heroes in my mind to get their insight and what excites them, and it's always inspiring. And after the first season, one of my friends, actually my cousin, called me and said, "Why are you just playing a little guitar? Like, you just keep teasing me with the beginning of songs. I need you to finish a song." So I started writing a song for each one of them, which has been really interesting. And there's been huge themes coming out of it. One of them is food. it really makes sense, again, with colonialism. One of the main tools used to kind of keep us all insecure was to have some food here, food there. Everybody has to trade. But with climate change messing with trade areas and with growing, that really puts that insecurity past the tipping point. So a push internationally is to rebuild local food sheds. So most of the calories we consume are within,
Within
quick
the distance that we can travel
which is
to,
what
yeah.
happened until very recently. Like that's what everybody did
yes.
everywhere.
Oh, yes.
Right? Just imagine.
Oh, yes.
Right? Obviously. But we have to relearn and reinvent and restore those systems locally. And we're ahead of the curve on that in Thunder Bay. There's been, partly because we're a little isolated, we have quite a few academics here that have invested time and ingenuity.
Exactly.
We have a really rooted farming community that's engaged with them over the years. So the fact that we have the food network, the Thunder Bay and Region Food Area Network, whatever their name is, and all the work they've done over the last many years actually is like other cities are turning to us and saying, how can we catch up with you? But we're not where we want to be.
The regional food strategy.
That's the group,
Kind
yeah.
of the regional food strategy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So talking to some of those farmers, some of those academics about the potential we have to have more of a relationship to our food, and also then to share it differently. So there's more communal eating. We can't all learn to cook necessarily from scratch, but we would benefit and be able to stretch what we have a lot better if more of the food we ate was done from scratch. So thinking creatively about that side of how we can get together as a community to eat together is also really exciting potential here locally that some of my episodes talk about and that I am really interested in.
So the podcast is called Something Different This Way Comes, right?
As in something wicked from from Macbeth, from the picking of my plums, but it's not wicked necessarily. We can just make sure it's different. Time for a change.
What are the other themes that you've covered through this through the podcast?
I don't know that I can name them all. I don't want to
Oh,
miss
no.
anybody.
Yeah.
But there's certainly been a lot about social cohesion and inclusiveness. There's been a lot about innovation and also small business. So I feel like there's a disconnect between how we talk about business and how we think about business. And an enormous number of Canadians have a small business. They have something they do because they know their community needs it, not because it's profitable to them. If you look at the books, you're like, why exactly are you doing this? But we have like this instinct to fill in the gaps and to bridge the needs of one another that I think Thunder Bay is really good at. And you can think of so many small businesses that we just
yes.
love the way that they add to our resilience and our joy in life.
tenacity. Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And that sort of idea that we can build on that in order to tailor the solutions we need here among us. And the other superpower that I think Thunder Bay has is that there's not 7 degrees of separation. There's like maybe 2, often 1, between people socially. So if you want to have a place that can collaborate and find solutions, we're ahead of the game on that one too.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
The networks are too strong.
They are
Yeah,
potentially strong. It means there's some sore spots where we've rubbed against each other before, but we can overcome that.
That social cohesiveness that you were talking about.
That's what I think
absolutely.
is key.
Heather, thank you. This is so interesting. I mean, you can go on and on about, so many diverse topics that you have already touched upon. Heather, you're a singer. We cannot wrap up our session without a song from you. So as we wrap up, we would love to hear get a song or love to hear you sing for us. On that note, I also would take thanks. Please accept our thanks and thank you for coming and joining us on this show.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And dear viewers, stay tuned and we'll be hearing Heather give us a song.
How do I love you? Let me count the ways I love you as the sun loves the horizon, kissing it soft and blushing, gentle as a sigh. I love you as lightning loves water, searing fire, electricity electricity, shiver me a tidal wave. How would I hold you? Let me smile and say I'd hold you as the earth holds its orbit hard and spinning a yielding sway. I'd hold you as land holds water submerged, embracing every island beyond its shore. How I do love you, hold me, love me, make my day. We are the air, sweet with springtime, birth becoming. The sea, fat with wealth unseamed. We are the earth, weighted with history. Water, warm, catch the sun. Swallow the sky. How I do love you, do I?